Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Insights from a Headhunter. Today, we have a fabulous guest with us, Helen from Belgium. She is a business performance coach, and before working with coaching and training, she has 20 years of experience in communication and marketing, especially for digital. So, welcome, Helen.
Thank you, Tiina. It's great to be here. It's a real honor.
Yes, and what a nice coincidence that we're talking about active listening, and I'm almost losing my voice. So I will do a lot of active listening.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
But it's what it happened when we spoke about this subject. Um, in person because we both live here close by. So we were talking about it's funny that people always when they talk about communications, it's about the verbal skills, but nobody talks about listening. So tell me a little bit more about your background and how you came to Belgium and a little bit about your corporate experience.
Oh, wow. So, how did I come to Belgium? He was a man, so it was it wasn't work. But that was a long time ago, and that was in 2000. And very quickly, so pre-Belgium. It feels sometimes that there wasn't a pre-Belgium, but I worked for 10 years in photography, and then I worked for a charity for 6 years working with, it's a theatre charity working with homeless, young offenders, kids at risk, raising awareness on, at the time, so we're talking 1990s, taboo subjects, including women and mental health. And then for personal reasons, we moved over to Belgium. My husband there was Belgian. And I started my life here in 2000 and very quickly got a job actually within a federation. And the job was, at the time, it was kind of IT and technology, or so information and technology, so that was in 2001, which over time evolved into digital communications in this federation. And it was a fantastic platform for me in Brussels. We started blogging, we started using Twitter, and we started trying out because the industry at the time was in desperation. So that's my experience. And then I ended up working for I've worked for a big corporation. I worked for a consultancy as well, all in that field of digital communications because it was new and exciting. And yeah. I think that's. Did I answer your questions?
Yes. And just to be clear that originally you come from the UK.
I am British. I absolutely am, and I'm also Belgian. And then I guess just to sort of follow on from that. So then in my mid-40s, I've always been interested in personal development, and then in my mid-40s, I became a freelance consultant. And I noticed that I was getting stuck in certain conversations. So somebody recommended that I did a coaching course, which would help me drive the conversation differently. And so I was like, all right then. I literally, and I had no idea what I was signing up for. And it was purely to have better conversations with clients. And in the process, realized that I found coaching really hard. Having coaching conversations really hard. I realized that I was on constant transmit as a consultant. And it feels good, doesn't it, to talk like I am today. Here I am on screen, and not to listen and to deeply listen. And so, so here we are today. I then became a coach and I fell in love with the process of coaching. And I'm actually now quite nicely, I'm moving back with the network of We're Ready for You. We're working more and more with clients, consulting, doing trainings, doing coaching in international corporations around Europe.
And what was it that made you choose the path of coaching?
Well, literally, I mean, I didn't necessarily choose it. It was just this thing in my mid-40s that I was struggling with certain conversations where I felt stuck. And I guess one might say, oh, because I have so much empathy.
Mm-hmm.
And there I was with the client stuck in his conversation or her conversation, really feeling for her or him. One burst into tears, and this other guy had a sort of existential crisis in this meeting. And I felt powerless in that moment because it was outside my realm of expertise. I'd come in for a very specific reason, but
Mm-hmm.
what I had done is generated a much broader thinking, and I didn't know how to constructively support that conversation to an outcome, to a useful outcome. And I just wanted to get out of those rooms as fast as possible. I felt guilty. I felt awkward. I felt that I'd done something wrong. And so that's how I got to coaching, was like, how can I actually just avoid those kind of situations and be a bit more useful?
Okay.
Yeah.
And I have a question for a friend.
Mm.
The thing about coaching, is it necessary to get a certification, or with 20 years work experience, could you do it without the certification?
Absolutely. Is that really a friend? Because okay.
Yes.
Oh wow, because it's very much in line with exactly where I'm at right now, Tiina. So no, I am very proud of being an accredited coach. It took
Mhm.
a huge amount of work to get that accreditation. Uh, a lot of work. It took me a couple of years behind the scenes of just grinding through. And what I do today with companies is I literally bring in the basics of how to drive a coaching conversation. So I'm not trying to make you a coach. I'm just trying to encourage how to drive a different type of conversation that encourages better thinking with your team or with the other person, that stops you thinking in the same way that got you into the problem. So it's shifting the level and the depth of exploring openness and ability to see new possibilities. And no, so absolutely, you do not need to be an ICF accredited coach. You do need some basic training. And if I can do a shameless promote, in April, I am actually doing my first online live coaching of helping either professionals, project managers, young managers, people who are starting out in their career, in 4 weeks. It's just once a week, meeting online and a bit of practice, how to actually have an effective coaching conversation. I'm passionate about the fact is that we are so much on transmit, so much on tell in business, and it would make such a difference if people just knew. They don't actually know how to slow down, check in with self, check in with the other person, and create a context where people can actually think more clearly. So that's what coaching is all about.
Yeah, and there you have those specific tools. So I'm very excited about this project in April.
Yeah.
So tell me shortly, what are the active listening techniques that we could use?
Okay. Well, so that when I was thinking about this for this live, I was thinking, every time I hear the word active listening, I feel like a rabbit in headlights, because it seems like there are some things that we need to do
Mm-hmm.
to be active listening. And if you Google it, you'll see eye contact. I've got to repeat back. I'm nodding. I'm yeah. So it's sort of this. It's actually this busy activity that to show that you're listening. And I would say that, and I was thinking, where does this word come from? Because active's giving the wrong impression. And so it actually comes from, just so you know, Carl Rogers in the 1940s, American clinical psychologist, noticed, the question was, why are some therapists more successful at helping their clients with their personal problems, resolving personal problems? And what they found out was that the therapists that did more listening and less talking were more successful. And so they did more research to understand exactly what are they doing. And so they coined the term active listening, Carl Rogers and his colleague, I can't remember what his name is. And so, but I think what's happened is that it's come into the workforce, probably in the 80s with the shoulder pads, that this is what you need to be doing to be active listening. And it came with great intentions, okay, to kind of shift the mindset from that sort of very dinosaur, post-industrial, do what I say, come into the office, don't think, just, you know, get on with it. And so good intentions, but I think the key point of active listening has been lost. And so tip number one would be, you know, what are you listening for? It's a question to ask yourself. What am I listening for with this person? And am I listening to connect, to build a relationship, to really learn something from this person? Am I willing to perhaps challenge my own understanding of something, or am I actually listening to control? All right, am I wanting to am I listening with an agenda, a private agenda, and I'm just going to pick out the things that work for me? And so, yeah, so I think that the step number one, if there's a tip, it's really check in with self and ask, what am I listening for? And is it about building a relationship? Is it about, am I coming with an attitude of curiosity or an attitude of judging? Am I coming, you know, am I coming with an energy when you want to connect with somebody? You know, there's a sense of respect, of kindness, of reflection. You know, my eyes might disappear out and go, oh, wow, I hadn't considered that. You know, I have no eye contact with you. I can't, because I'm so engaged in what you're saying. I've disappeared off. And in fact, I'd like to say that when it comes to body language, I've got terrible body language. My eyes go all over the place. And I'm coaching people every day. And I notice their body language as well. When they're really tuned in, their eyes are in different places. They're looking at me on screen. They're not looking at the camera up here. Or they're looking at themselves because they're reflecting back to themselves. So, you know, I think that the key message around body language and this energy is that if you really are listening, you don't really need to worry too much about your body language, because people know. They know when you're acting. And I think if you look at the camera, that's broadcasting. And so I think there's a lot of forgiveness, particularly on screen, that we know that you're looking at me. If you're actually looking at something, your eyes are slightly off, you can tell. Or whether you're reading something, right? So the thing is, so, you know, what are you listening for, and how are you being when you're listening? You know, are you engaged? Is your energy about respect, or are you coming in with that energy of conditional, slight irritation, slight speedness? Okay, get on with it. I'm listening for that. Those things. Okay, you're in. Okay, oh no, you're out. I've checked out. And do you know what I mean? It's conditional, and that intention. So either if you're listening, why am I listening? Is it to connect and to find that common ground, even if we don't agree, which builds safety and trust? Or is my intention, as I kind of said, you know, are you in or out? There's a loaded gun in my listening. It's and perhaps I'm only listening to then twist back to you. So, well, tip number one, ask yourself, what am I listening for, and what do I want to create?
I think that's a really, really good one. And when I think about the job interview situations,
Oh yeah,
especially the online ones, and if there's a difference between online and face-to-face listening, and what you said, it's really the energy. If the person who is interviewing you comes with the energy of judgment, looking at your CV, what is missing instead of what how we could build a gap, and also the speed, like you said, you have to answer really quickly, and if you don't do that, that you don't feel that you're listened to in a
right.
respectful and kind way, and that says a lot about how the future work will look like in the company as well.
Yeah, it's yeah, nothing else to add to that. I mean, absolutely. And yeah, it's you're gonna get the other person performing. They're gonna start lying. They're gonna start saying what they want, what you want to hear, and that they'll sense it. So tip number 2, Tiina. So along with what are you listening for, the second tip would be self-management. Self-management and that silence. Now, and I think that one size doesn't fit all, but less is more. So, and particularly I mentioned this, so it's not about you when you're listening. It's about the other person. If you really are listening to connect, then really become more aware of those, how can you say, notice those thoughts that are popping up when you're listening that are desperate to interrupt those judgments, those questions, and just jot them down. We have these constant sort of impulses. Oh, yes, that reminds me. And oh, that happened to me. And tell me about, I'll tell you about the story. And we completely sideswipe the other person and we lose our train of thought. So when it comes to active listening, then take a pen and paper and really, or somehow of catching yourself wanting to interrupt and just put it down. And perhaps ask yourself, do I really need to know this now? For example, I was listening to somebody the other day about a car crash. And old Helen would have said, oh, really? What kind of car have you got? And it's irrelevant. But I really have to work hard. Or ask something, oh, yeah, what color was it? Or where did it happen? And it's like, it's irrelevant, really. And so what will happen is if I do allow myself to ask those kind of questions is, well, I'm not listening anymore. I'm on transmit. But that's me talking. And then they are answering the question. But what happens is we lose a lot of time. And often my clients are talking about, oh, I haven't got time for coaching. I haven't got time to listen. And actually, I think it's not about the time of listening. It's actually about some of the silly questions that they ask, which distract from what's really important. So self-management and create that silence, to be as discreet, really, as possible. And as on the coaching side, recently I was on a course which was internal family systems, and it's about empathetic listening. And what they do is you're literally like a mask. I find it sometimes a bit too much, but you are totally looking at the screen, listening, not moving, not attracting attention, just being purely present. And while that might be a bit extreme, I think that, I think more self-management, stillness is appropriate when you're active listening. So not necessarily nodding the head, because the other thing about nodding the head, by the way, is particularly as a coach, we have to be really careful. I do it, but you must be careful with the person you're doing it with, because some people need it as a reassurance that they're going in the right direction. So it becomes this feedback loop, unconscious, that yes, you're, good girl, or good person, you're going in the right direction, or maybe if I sit back going, oh my goodness, maybe I said something wrong. Right? So your body language, I would say, is just keep it minimal, to not be distracting and not be some sort of unconscious feedback loop that then it goes that make them very nervous and put them on a sort of internal dialogue that something's wrong. So that's so what have we got? Self-management is tip number 2.
Yep.
Yeah, another one I do in coaching, which is, so listen for the facts and separate out the fiction and the story. Not the fiction, the story, because it is true for them. And that's actually, so rather than getting sucked into the story, really try and hold on to the different facts that they weave in. And there's very few facts actually that are spoken, so it shouldn't be too difficult.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. Yeah, so most people are talking in story, interpretation, judgment, opinion, fears, which is interesting. But I guess if you're listening as a job interview, I guess you must be listening constantly between
facts and figures. Yeah.
Facts versus interpretation, or the tone that they're telling the story in. So yeah, I think that for me is a trick that I do, is in active listening. And when I then find the right moment, which is the thing that we know we're supposed to do, so I haven't put it down as a tip, but just playing back in a nutshell, like just really summarize. If you just summarize back the facts, it takes seconds. So they'll tell this whole story about this, and I was really worried about that, and but because I wasn't sure, and then I think she meant to say X, but she said this. And so in the end you say, so you were in a meeting and she said this, and I might add, and you had some thoughts about it. And when you play back actually the very simplest part of the story, people go, oh well, when you put it like that,
makes sense.
Yeah, okay, it's actually, yeah, so I find that that's a really interesting trick to help them see where they are in the story, and actually there's not much going on apart from a lot of interpretation.
Yeah. And I think it's also good for people who go on interviews, when they prepare their stories, to put as many facts as possible. And of course you need to have a storyline, because that's what people want to listen to, but still cut as much as possible that's not necessary. It's important to give context, but not all the details, because people are busy at work. They want you to get to the point and answer their questions.
Well, if we're talking about active listening, it's paired up with humble inquiry. And what is that? That's basically asking a question that you genuinely don't know the answer to, and you're curious to know. And so if you are finding, as you are listening, which is slightly different from active listening, but to help somebody, what I often ask is, what's important to share? What's important about that situation for you. And that word important for you helps them stop giving a shopping list of everything that happened. And you can repeat it as well, just gently. Just say, I hear a lot of things, but what was important to you about that experience or that project? And it can just slow them down and go, okay, well, what was important was, this. And that's quite nice. So just again, to help people. What's interesting is the answer, right? Because you actually don't know.
That's a really, really good tip to put what is important. Let me see. We have some people joining us live.
Cool.
We have Gillian Whitney from Las Vegas. Hello,
Wow.
Tiina and Helen. Hello, Gillian. Hello. she will have her live in 1.5 hours with John Espirian. So I'll make sure I will catch that one soon. We have a neighbor from the Netherlands, Marjolein Hoekstra. This is so up my alley. Glad to be making it here on time. Greetings from the Netherlands.
Nice.
And we have Jayant from good evening from India. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, I mean, I'm curious for people who are listening in. I don't have all the answers, and I've thought about this for this live today, and I'm trying to do something different than what we know, with sort of the nodding and the sort of looking, and I guess in person you do want to look, but maybe the people who are joined in, maybe they've got some tips that they'd like to share that are out of the ordinary, or things that they've noticed that they actually really trigger them, perhaps even something that I've said that they really don't like. And because I really think what's important is that one size doesn't fit all. Me not nodding, not looking in the eye might be terrible for somebody, but actually might be quite, culturally respected.
Yes.
And respectful for somebody else. And I think you need to read the room. But yeah, so if there is any ideas, I'd be curious. I'm always willing to be challenged or to learn something new.
Let me see who we have more. We have Kevin from Texas. We have Janne Hingbalu from Sweden. And Gillian says, I seem to nod my head a lot when I'm active listening.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing, right? I think when you are actually engaged and you want to connect, you will naturally be who you naturally are. As I say, my body language is appalling. Look, I'm hand moving, my eyes are going everywhere. I'm incredibly expressive. And I just think, look, that just is me. And I'm not trying to be somebody else. I'm not trying to be a BBC broadcaster. And I think that people get your genuine connectedness. And I think some people are just less expressive. And that's absolutely fine. So I think if you just focus on the first things about, what am I trying to achieve in this conversation? Am I trying to build a connection, or am I actually just, and it could be, and I'm not judging, it could be about control. And when you start actually just trying to self-manage and stop interrupting all the time, you will have, you probably will start naturally having the right body language. The other thing you asked, Tiina, was about taking notes.
Oh yes, I'm constantly taking notes. Like I can't listen without taking notes. And afterwards, it doesn't mean that I can read my own handwriting. I have a doctor's handwriting, but I work as a headhunter. So, but it's what I do. So I often show my head instead of looking, into the camera lens. But it really, I tell that to people with whom I'm on Zoom calls, that I just like to take notes, and it's nothing personal.
Right, exactly. You're just honest. And whereas other people go, oh no, you must look at them as much as possible and not take notes. I like you, for years, I struggle to hear sometimes if I don't I certainly can't hear you if I look you in the eye. So I am somebody that I struggle to look people in the eye all the time. I just can't think so it's either I don't think and I look you in the eye, but I won't hear it either. I'm sorry, I'm 53. I'm not going to change.
Maybe there is a tip that you can look between the eyebrows. So instead of looking somebody in their eyes, which can distract you from thinking, just look here and you give the same impression that you're looking at them, but it's a neutral space and
I'll try it.
focus there.
Okay, no, I can do that. I can do that. Yeah, and so I've talked about body language. I've talked about eyes. I think I think people online. I think if you're going to be focusing on the camera, it's broadcasting, and do it if you're brilliant at it, and you can listen. But I think we're so got used to somebody looking slightly off screen because we know they're actually looking at the screen, or they're looking at themselves. Right? Let's be honest, I can see it with my clients. Their eyes are flicking between me and themselves, for whatever reason. So, but that's, I think there's a lot of forgiveness around that. So, yeah, is there any, my key approach to asking questions is that you have the word you in it. Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So, asking questions. So my key approach to asking questions is making sure it starts with a what.
Mm-hmm.
What? So rather than it being a why-based question, I've really tried to ban all whys from my language, even in my day-to-day. And you get very interesting questions when you ask a what question. So the classic being, why are you late? Of course, you wouldn't ask that in a job interview, but hopefully. Turning why are you late to, or why was the project late, to what would need to happen for the project to be on time, or what would you do differently? What would you honestly don't know what the person's going to say. You might have some ideas, but so it's interesting to listen to what people say when you start asking what questions.
Yeah, that sounds like a good one. I will put it in practice this week.
Yay!
We have also Johannes joining us from Kinshasa, and John is Virian. So I will see him on the LinkedIn Live in 1.5 hours.
Oh, brilliant!
Celebrating the Espresso Plus community's 1-year birthday.
Oh, fantastic! Tell me, what do you think, Tiina, about empathy? Do you have any opinions on using empathy as a headhunter?
I think it's the key thing, because in our careers things happen, like what happened. So if I ask you, why do you have a gap in your CV, most people have a gap, especially when they have children or whatever happens. If they were made redundant, then what is a better question, I think. And really to listen with empathy, instead of judging
Yes,
from the
judge.
beginning.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Cool. No, because it's on my list, and I haven't mentioned it because it comes from that sense of wanting to connect. But I'm conscious of time. Can you believe it? It's
Yes.
already.
Is there something final that you would like to say before we finished for today?
No, I mean, it's been absolutely
Where can
pleasure.
people find you?
So you can find me on LinkedIn right here, Helen Dunnett. I think there's only 2 of us on LinkedIn that are Helen Dunnetts. And I've got a website, Helen Dunnett. You can see the spelling, helendunnett.com. And yeah, if anybody's interested in learning to have coaching conversations, then they should sign up for my little program that starts in April. Otherwise, if you've got any questions, give me a shout.
Yes, so connect with Helen and let's continue the conversation on LinkedIn. So I will put on some music and see you next time.
Thanks, Tiina.